Welcome to Life Science Success Podcast. My name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences. I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. Today, I'm joined by Anthony Marotta. Welcome, Anthony.
Hi, Don. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you as well. So, can you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Certainly happy to do so. So, I am a PhD trained scientist. I started my career actually working very much with clinical folks right from the outset. So, when I was doing my PhD, I actually worked with a gastroenterologist and pathologist, and at that time, we were looking at studying perturbations in different signaling pathways in the context of colon cancer. And, looking at, like, let's say, diversity, even within the tumors, when patients had underlying genetic conditions that predispose them to cancer, we were looking at how those molecular derangements actually influenced, let's say, biochemical patterns within the tumor. And so it was such a great opportunity to work with clinical folks to connect what we do at the bench level with what's going on, at the patient level. And I've continued that journey within my career. I've been a serial entrepreneur, started up a few different companies over the course of the last 20 years, all within the life sciences space, with the exception of my most recent startup in the health and wellness, food space. And really, again, everything that I do as part of my journey is to make things better, either for the patient or the consumer, in the case of the latter, proposition. And just I love making or attempting to make a difference in the life of individuals. So
It's so important, and I mean, it's great to have it as a part of your overall mission. It sounds like you've woven in a little bit of your previous history as well into what you're even doing today. What is it that drove you to want to be in life sciences?
that started at a very young age. For those of us that are a little bit older, they may remember a show called Quincy. It was an ER show.
Yeah, right.
And as a young kid, like on the weekends, I was watching that, and I was always mesmerized with the whole ER life and the concept of being a doctor. And again, it was something that I knew from a very young age that I wanted to actually grow into and or to evolve into. And so again, too, I was pretty headstrong, because as a individual in high school, I really kind of came into my own intellectually, like, let's say, as I entered into university and was mentored by one of my profs in biochemistry. I wouldn't have said at that time that I would have been an exceptional student, but really, when Professor Thayer actually, that was the prof that inspired me, took me under his wing, that's when things started to happen for me. And to this day, I'm grateful for having him as a mentor.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the impact that the right instructor or right professor, can have on people as well. I have a similar story in my background as well. It's funny though. One of my kids had said that they wanted to be a medical examiner, so they wanted to do exactly what Quincy did on that show, and it terrified me because I was just like, you talk about seeing some of the uglier sides of humanity, but I know it's needed. I just I wouldn't want to have a kid that's what they want to go do, but that's what one of my kids did want to go do.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah.
it's important, and so again, as my journey evolved, being, let's say, more of a trial and error type of person, I think doing a PhD where you can actually, like, experiment is the right fit for me, clinically, because again, obviously, seeing a patient, things are a little bit different than playing, let's say, in a lab, right?
Mm.
So I'm happy to affect change, but based on the laboratory environment, and then translating that to the patient through the appropriate clinical person as well. So, but I
So
think you need that in science,
yeah,
connecting
and
to
you're
the connecting to the patient.
And you're doing a lot of different things right now, right? So, I mean, you're working with Moydx. What are the problems that they're looking to solve? And then maybe we get into a few of your other ventures
Sure.
as well. It seems like you're a busy guy.
Yeah, I gotta wear a few different hats. So, some days it's like juggling all that and create some complexity. But I think, having that, it makes my day extremely enjoyable. Some days kind of stressful and long. But, with the Moy, I'm their North American medical director. And I think one of the things that we're seeing there, and, again, I love the whole field of oncology because what happens in oncology from a personalized medicine standpoint really does spill over into all the other clinical areas. And so with that, what we're seeing, obviously, there's a flurry of new therapeutic modalities coming forth, obviously, onto the market or in trials. One of the things that we've talked about for years is the need for more of these personalized medicine strategies. So, in the area of oncology, you're really like living that. And so with Amoy, we have all of these, let's say, personalized genetic solutions testing wise that are more kidicized. So really with Amoy, what we're trying to do is enable more of a regional like strategy for molecular testing as opposed to kind of being siloed with, let's say, some of the larger groups, because again, one of the things clinically is turnaround time, right? The
Sure.
faster that the clinician gets a result that's meaningful, the more likely that they're able to intervene more immediately with an appropriate course of, let's say, therapy that might, for example, impact the patient, and in the case of oncology, improve the survival, duration, so to speak. And I think, the concept of a decentralized testing model there in oncology will facilitate, for example, rapid turnaround time, to results. And I think that that's what we're, trying to do. I mean, Amoy itself has started with an overseas, it started as an Asian company out of China. They've moved into the European space, and the North American market is something new for Amoy, and it's something that we're working on to address, entering the North American market. The company has some really awesome partnerships with large pharma, Astra, Pfizer, Merck. They're a really progressive, company as well, and not only in terms of technology, but forward thinking and becoming, I would say more like a North American type of company. It's such a pleasure, to work with them as their medical director. So, one of the things we are looking at doing within the Amoy North America is really to run some investigator initiated studies comparing, our technology, because we've done this, for example, in Europe and other areas, but really we want to do some head-to-head studies looking at, for example, some of our, solutions and compare them to, the more classic types of companies like, for example, Myriad Foundation, et cetera, that are more present within and established in the North American market.
And so you would run the tests in some local lab in the country that you're collecting the samples in, I assume.
So we wouldn't be collecting the samples. All of this would be done through the corresponding investigator. They'd collect the samples. We just enable them with the testing, devices to run that head-to-head, analysis. So everything that we have is kit-based, including, for example, like even our logic or algorithm-based solutions. We actually have a dedicated system called Andes that either can sit in the cloud and you can upload your results to the cloud, or you can actually, bring the server in-house so that you're not, for example, having to send data, outside of your walls. And then, all the algorithms and everything are equipped within Andes, and then you just load the data in, and then you get the corresponding result from the system, and then you'd compare that to, for example, more of the conventional testing formats. And so this
Okay.
would all be done more right now, like under the umbrella of like a research, type of modality, like an RUO.
Okay. Yeah. And then, are there other healthcare related or life science related things that you're involved in?
Yeah, I consult and advise a number of other companies. So currently, also just in the final stages of the launch of a pancreatic cancer marker.
Mm.
that was licensed in through one of my colleagues. The company is called Due North. It looks at responsiveness to gemcitabine with pancreatic cancer patients. So it's called HENT1. It's an older technology. And so I was brought in to help them take it from the, let's say, R&D stage more towards, having something that's clinically ready to, enter the market. And so we're just around the corner from launching that. I've also started up a company, or co-founded a company, pardon me, called Ogrex, and that company specializes in the area of arthritis. So I spent, I'm trying to think, I think I spent 12 years there as their CSO and CMO, really taking, the technology from the point of concept. We actually had data by Western blot. I think it was in 15 patients, and we licensed this in. We developed all the critical reagents, designed and built out the kit, and then have actually launched that commercially within Canada and the United States. We've also seen marked and made it available, on a limited basis through Europe as well. But the main thing there was that we're really focusing on the North American market. And so I did that for a number of years. I stepped away because as they migrated from R&D towards commercial, at that point, my job was done, right? Like, so to speak.
Right.
I have since, in the last, I want to say, probably 8 months, have come back into the company in a consultancy capacity now, and I'm helping them move the technology along further. And I'm actually now in a position where we're able to advance some of the pipeline assets that I had discovered. All in the area of arthritis. So one of the projects right now that I'm pretty excited to take from the point of having good data in R&D is actually a test to look at identifying patients with ankylosing spondylitis. So right now, there's currently really no useful diagnostic tests other than, let's say, clinical workup to help, a rheumatologist discern whether the patient has non-mechanical back pain or they actually are predisposed to, a condition like ankylosing spondylitis. So we're just kicking that program off. Actually, we just got off of a call. Actually, what was it, about 30 minutes ago prior to this, where that project's going to start to move forward. And so I've got that, and then beyond that, as you know as well, I also run Peckish, which is a food
Yes.
company, more of a health and wellness company. And that's a whole story, in of itself. So I'll pause there because I'm sure you have more questions on the life sciences side as well, possibly.
No, it actually, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, I just know that you're a busy guy on the life sciences side, and then you're also leading Peckish. So, what are you trying to do with Peckish? What is the main mission for Peckish?
So, I mean, the main mission obviously is to tackle some of the issues that we're seeing around, the whole ethos of unhealthy, highly processed foods, right? And again, and I, talk about this quite a bit with the different stakeholders that we're involved with. But, again, we've been listening to, the need to change diet, like reduce your salt, reduce intake of sugar, all the same thing. And as I continue even to watch what's going on social media, I find, for example, that it's the same information, for example, that continues to be recycled, so to speak. And, on my end, it's like, okay, we need to take action and we need to affect change. I'm all about change. And, I think there's some really great opportunities to, like, again, and, I guess the connection to, let's say, the life sciences side is we always talk, for example, about the need for preventative modalities, right?
Right.
And, I'm wondering how we as a community start to move or shift things more upstream. And I think, arguably with all of this molecular work and, all of these, let's say, wearables and digital solutions that we have, I think we're moving in the right direction. But again, a critical component to well-being isn't just about exercise, in sleep. It's also, and I know most people know this about what you put in your mouth. But when I start to really, delve into the products that are available to consumers, that, in my opinion, they're, we can do better, like even as food manufacturers. And so what we aspire to do is not only as a company be better and produce better products, but we also now have rolled out, for example, a certification program that we are offering to other brands that want to be better, and to produce healthier products in more of a, validated way. So, over the last little bit with the pandemic, things obviously, slowed down. So we started to deploy effort priority to build out, more of a logic-based algorithm to look at scoring the healthiness index of food. And we refer to it as a pharmaceutical score.
That's a great way to do it. I mean, it seems to me like there's a real need in the market for this. I mean, I know at least for me, during the pandemic, I mean, I gained a lot of weight, and then now I'm working very hard to get it back off. And one of the things I know instantly is that a lot of it ties to the processed foods that I consumed, at least during the pandemic. And we're eating a lot more healthy in our house as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that too, because I think, when you look at the pandemic, in just talking to people, that, let's say, didn't really appreciate cooking. I think what, has happened when people were locked down, like some, migrated towards watching more TV. Others, looked at what they could do within their home. So I know some people that were not really, let's say, very proficient in the kitchen that have now, had the opportunity and the time to actually do that. And now they've changed their entire, habits where they're cooking more at home and making everything from scratch rather than buying, things off the shelf or ordering through, any of these third party, like, let's say, providers. So I think, again, we've all had our struggles, including myself. I like sitting for, let's say, 18 hours a day, like during the pandemic, at the beginning, working, right? Like you became very sedentary. And even myself, it's like, okay, I need to
Yeah.
kick off the COVID weight. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing, even with me as a consultant. I've spent an awful lot of time just working. I mean, just back to
yeah,
back to back working. And it's funny because I have, some things that I'm currently working on that tie back to this idea of, overcommitment in our life, and how do you get rid
yeah,
of so much overcommitment, which then, contributes even more to this, the sedentary lifestyle that we have. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's such a, honestly, it's nice to kind of get back to somewhat of a normal where
Mhm.
you can actually see people.
Yep. In a few weeks' time, I'm attending my first conference in a long time. So it's I will be actually on the road for a little bit. Attending my very first conference since
Yeah,
the pandemic started. So yeah.
yeah,
So
no, that's good.
what is one lesson that you've learned in your career that shapes what it is that you do?
That's uh, that's a good question. I mean, there's been so many lessons and learnings. Like, for example, over the years, I would say again, you know, I'll go with two, but like I know you want to have one, so hopefully it's okay to like do
Yeah,
two.
sure.
So number one learning is the people that are around you. They either build you up or they effectively break you down. So knowing who to surround yourself with is extremely critical because at the end of the day, when you start up a business, there's so many ups, downs, turns, twists that you need to deal with, and you want to have the people around you that support you and help you get through those difficult times. And then I'd say the second thing, again too, is, and this isn't my statement, it's one of my colleagues' statements, but I'm going to take that from her. Spend 80% of your time planning and 20% executing. I think
Mm.
sometimes we want to run really rapid, pardon me, and we don't put the appropriate time into plan, and that's where things can either, you know, go extremely well or derail, and then you have to spend time resolving it, right? So that planning right at the outset is absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's funny, as I got started with the podcast and with consulting and other things. I mean, one of the things that I found is that I was holding myself back much more than other people around me were telling me, "Hey, look, go, man, go. This is there's a lot of good that can come from the conversations that you have and things like that." But at the same time, this really isn't my personality setting in front of the computer, more or less, interviewing somebody. But at the same time, I would love to get the information out there about the companies
Yeah.
that are out there that I know of, and willing to learn a lot more as well about the interesting field that we're in, because there's just so much going on
Oh,
overall. So it's
absolutely.
good
It's
to have people pushing you forward or not holding you back, I guess, or in your
yeah, yeah,
sphere. Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, it's a very exciting time. I look forward to like looking at what happens over the next 5 to 10 years. Like, just when I look at, again, I have, yeah, I spend probably similar to you, like, laptop, it's almost for me like obsolete. My phone is like where I end up spending more of my time. It's just more efficient, like, for me. And I look at it and just what we can do now, the power of that speed translates to, for example, what's happening, within the life sciences space, that we have access now to so much more data and
Right.
information.
Yeah, I was telling somebody that the other day that so I guess for bio, which is the conference that's coming up
Yep.
that I'm going to, um, they somebody had said that Amazon wasn't going to go to the conference, and
Uh,
I said, I mean, everybody that I know that's working in diagnostics, at least in North America right now, if you need extra compute, Amazon's who most people turn to go to. And so,
yeah,
I was kind of surprised that they weren't going to be there, because for any drug developer or any diagnostics company that will be there, it's unfortunate that they won't, because I mean, they're contributing an awful lot to life sciences today. So that was kind of my
absolutely.
general comment about them, just coming or not coming to the conference. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So in terms of advice that you might give to somebody that's just getting started in life sciences, what might you tell somebody that is just getting started in this field? That would either sort of draw them in, or things that they might look out for.
So, so are you talking more like from the development side or overall? Because there's just, I've had to walk, like with Peckish, for example, I've had to wear multiple hats within the organization. And it's, probably, again, we assume that being a CEO is like easy, as an example. So I don't know which angle you want me to address that question from, because again, wearing different hats, I can respond, very differently.
Yeah, so
So
I
do
mean,
you?
I guess from my perspective, it might be from more of the general standpoint, but
Okay,
I certainly um, take it whichever way that you'd like to take the question.
sure. So I'll take it more from like the leadership perspective, because I think one area again too, and I've seen this time in and time out in working with different clients, like, again, as a or as a scientist, we obviously have a really great understanding of certain things, but that doesn't always mean that we understand everything in business. And so, again, going to my original comment about surrounding yourself with the right people, not everyone can be a CEO. I'd say again too, like, if you're gonna go in, like, to do something, we often get tied to what we're doing, and we kind of, there's an emotional connection. I always hear people, it's like my child, or my project. I on my end again too, like, to affect change, and I'll use Ogrex as an example. I worked, what was it, 12 odd years on that, and then elected to take a step back as they went from more of an R&D to more of a commercial like mindset, right? Because again, there's a time and place for everything. So I think you don't want to be married or tied to whatever you're doing, right? Like you have to know that there's a time and place for you, like in, the whole journey of your, and that might mean that you need to effectively take a step back to make it better, right? Because if we're really trying to, for example, impact people's well-being, then you can take it to a certain point, but at some point you might need to switch the players on the team, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's a really important lesson for everyone. Just remove that emotional connection. There's always another project. I always say, like, there's always another project that we can jump to, right?
Right.
And it's knowing when the appropriate time is to, like, effectively maybe take a step back.
Yeah, it's interesting that you'd say that, because I think a lot of people right, they like sort of the consistency of the same thing forever. I think the world is a bit different than that today, where a lot of people aren't afraid to sort of take a step one direction or the other. The one thing I typically
Yeah.
refer mentoring students to is that this idea of seasons. There are seasons in your life. There's a
Yeah.
season of sort of initial growth that you're going to go through as you come out of college and collect skills and all those sort of things. And then there's going to be sort of a plateau in your life that you have to decide, what is that plateau for? Is that
Yeah.
plateau for personal growth, or is it for, growing a family, or, what is that next season for? And there'll be continual seasons as you go along, that you have to decide what in your life is that for. But I also would say the same thing in terms of companies. There are people, certainly, that are, more growth oriented. There are other people that are good for, kind of keeping the status quo. I mean, as you came into COVID, the last thing you need is like somebody that's really disruptive in place, that's disrupting on top
Yeah.
of the already disruptive environment that you have. So, yeah.
Oh,
So that,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
No, that's that. COVID has taught us a lot. Like, even again, resilience. And I think,
yeah,
quote unquote, coming out of it, there'll be opportunities, and it's how you navigate the waters to identify those opportunities and what's right for you as an individual, and for your company for that matter as well.
yeah,
But I think the other big kind of learning too is that, again, when you're in business, having a really good CEO, absolutely. Like for me now moving forward, like yeah, I always want someone on the financial side right next to me as well, because
yeah.
that your success or your failure is so much tied to, for example, managing your finances appropriately as well.
Yeah. I mean, a good CFO tells you when to push the gas and when to hold on and keep the brake
Yeah.
on. So, yes, absolutely. CFOs are an important part of every organization. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've had this year?
You know, that's a good question. I probably look at challenges a little bit differently, rather than as a challenge. Where are the opportunities? So I think coming out of the, let's say, each business has their own challenge. So I'll just use the Peckish one because, again, that one was one of the companies during the pandemic, obviously, that was hit the hardest, right? And so just navigating the waters, for example, over the last few years, like, of COVID, have been obviously, quite tumultuous. And, I'm glad that we're kind of on, out of it now, out of that, tailspin, right? And when I look at our current challenges, it's about scaling the business. So, but I'm looking at it, okay, coming out of it, we know that's a challenge, but where are the opportunities? So right now, for example, again, just switching, our own internal mindset from, like, trying to just, how shall I put it, create a bit of a steady state to, like, growth. It's like, every pandemic appreciates that, for example, food, like, cooking at home, right? Like food tastes a certain way. It tastes different when it's made at home. Budgetary constraints like inflation, all of these things kind of confound everything. But I think the one thing, when you're navigating this, it's like having, the right partners, number one, to work with. Number two, it's, people are more attuned now, are accustomed to eating differently, right? So I'm happy to be able to offer that already, because that's what we were doing, as a company. So I always look at challenges. Sorry for the long-winded answer. As where are the opportunities, and then I just kind of drive there, because every day we're going to have challenges, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just, business, starting up a company isn't easy, right? And be prepared for rocky rides, right? Like it's that roller coaster, up, down, twist, turn, right? That's the entrepreneurial life, right? But it's always finding, that North Star to, move towards.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and it's a great way to reframe it overall, right? That challenges are opportunities as well, waiting to be waiting to be worked on and solved as well. What is something that you're just starting to do this year?
For the first time, because again, so I'll use the Peckish, example, as to what we're doing. So, oftentimes when we spoke to people, they couldn't really interpret or understand, the connection. Like, what are you doing different? Like, how are doctors and chefs working together to create like healthier food? And I think, again, as I'm sure you can appreciate, like being a scientist, sometimes like communication to the general consumer isn't always like great. It doesn't like it's not what we're accustomed to doing. You know, it can often be confusing as well. Like so, people will gloss over. So I think one of the things that we're doing now a little bit different. We're trying to connect more to the end consumer and explain why we're different, and then work with like dietetics individuals as well to help us get that messaging correct, so that the consumer can understand, and even the vendors, they can appreciate and understand what we're doing differently. And I tell people, like, not everything is created equally. So we take a lot of pride and effort to actually make sure that whatever we're using, the parts that we're using to build the whole product are good for you. Because I know, what, we're never going to change everyone, and get everyone to eat plants, as an example. So, again, you might be pescatarian, you might be a carnivore, right? Like, so when you have all these different, let's say, styles of cuisine that you have to offer, I want to always drive towards best in class, right? I
Mhm.
want it to be as healthy as it can be. And so we're just starting to refine the messaging a bit to explain it to consumers.
And so, where can people find peckish foods today? I mean, that's the one thing that keeps popping into my head is
Yeah.
so if I go to the grocery store, will I find peckish there?
In some, again, so what we had endeavored to do when we first opened up, with this concept, was to be more of a bricks and mortar type of, strategy. But the market drove us to becoming more of a manufacturer. So we're working with, institutional clients, again, and we're more situated, let's say, right now in Vancouver, Canada. We moved into Alberta during the pandemic, but obviously, during the pandemic, you had to, how shall I put it, in some cases, put the e-brake on. So right now, we're revisiting, for example, our growth strategy. So part of this, like, part of the thinking now is, again, we have these really great propositions. We'll continue to innovate in terms of building, let's say, healthier for you products. But the whole model now, from us doing everything on our own, has evolved from that concept to actually, if you're a manufacturer, if you're a retailer, like that has your own commissary where you're making stuff, right? Like we'll equip you with the, the know-how, the tools, and give you access to the brand, and you can, effectively produce those products, for example, within your own walls. We think that arguably, will create more of the appropriate multiplier effect to equip people, with the right tools to make these, types of, like, products. So that's our accessibility strategy right now that we're working on for 2022.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how many of your products actually start to drift south. I do look forward to seeing things, make it to Colorado where I'm at, and see the company grow for sure.
Yeah.
So there are three. Go ahead. Yep.
Oh, yeah, I was going to actually say, so, we actually, as part of our mandate now through Project Healthy Human, we've rolled out this certification program. So we're starting to work with other brands that aspire, that fundamentally are aligned with us in mindset and philosophy. And so we're certifying their products, and we're helping them actually like enter, the US market with that, so I'm pretty excited to like even, take, go beyond obviously just what Peckish is doing and support other brands in their vision to like, bring healthier products onto the market.
Very good. So there are three questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
You know what inspires me? I think number one, it's the drive to affect change for the positive. Right? No matter what I do, there's always that connection to the patient, so to speak. So again, even when I'm talking to companies in the food space, my mind gravitates always towards thinking of people as a patient. And I hate to say that, but how can I help you be better? So I think
Very,
that's what inspires me.
very good. And what concerns you?
I generally don't have any concerns. That might sound terrible, like, but at the end of the day, like, there's always going to be things that come up, and it's, I always tell people it's not how you react to a situation, it's how you meticulously plan and then respond to that situation. I
Yeah.
don't like to bog myself down with concerns. It creates negative thinking.
Yeah, I can definitely empathize with that as well, because it's um, this idea of the way that you work your way out of a situation is much more important to me than how you sort of dwell in the moment, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so show me your pathway forward is
yeah,
typically the common response that I think most people that have interacted with me professionally anyway, they would they
yeah,
would say the same thing.
yeah.
And what excites you?
Well, many things, but I would say if we're talking about life sciences, seeing, for example, that your hard work then gets translated to something that's meaningful for doctors and for patients. So again, within the Ogrex realm, they've hit some pretty like awesome milestones in terms of number of patients being tested and stuff. And there was actually a systematic review that was published, I think, earlier this year from the NHS, where again they're citing that there's enough data to substantiate the clinical utility of this marker that we worked on, that it combines well like with other markers that the rheumatologists have, and that effectively it's a welcome addition. So when you get that independent validation and you've spent 12 years grinding, and again, when I say
Right.
grinding, within a 2.5 year period, we published, I think, 90 abstracts and 10 peer review articles. What goes into that. So there was a lot of like late nights and, a lot of like, how shall I put it, pushing through like certain things to achieve that. And now, looking at, the fact that the community is responding in that way, like it's gratifying. It's humbling.
Mm. So important. And I mean, it's just such a long pathway. I mean, yesterday I was interviewing somebody that was much more later in the product development space and doing kind of viral vector studies and things like that towards the end. And I just kept thinking in the back of my mind, the shorter window that they get to see between viral vector study to actual release of whatever drug that it is has got to be a heck of a lot less compared to 12 years of collecting data, working with patients and writing papers. It's just an awfully long time before you actually get to market.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I mean, we got to market, but again, just over the course of, the years, like you were like publishing with opinion leaders, for example, like through collaborative efforts, and then there started to be, others like wanting to do investigator initiated studies, and then what has kind of happened as a consequence of just being commercially available, now people are like testing it independently, to us, and they're seeing, for example, that the data holds true. That's gratifying when, again, you've got your community, if you will, validating all of your efforts independent of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anthony Marotta, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you spending time with me.
Don, I appreciate it as well. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a lot.